Hello everybody, I'm Melissa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to walk through the astrology of April 12th through 18th. We have a ton going on. It's Aries week. There is a pile up in the sign of Aries. We have a new moon in the sign of Aries. We got a lot to talk about. It's a lot of fast moving. Yeah, a lot going on. So we're going to get into all of that. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on here. These weekly videos, they come out every Saturday, so that way you have them ahead of the weekly video or ahead of the week coming up. And then on Sundays, we have a live meditation. Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We join here together on YouTube to meditate on the astrology. We talk a little bit first about the transits, the main things that are going on, lean into maybe some specific themes if they work for you. And then we come into a space of quiet, a space of silence, a space of meditation, a place where we can create personal conversations with the astrology and take the mundane transits that are up here and bring it down to the personal level. Really within those personal conversations, that is where the magic really happens. And that's where the connection to the astrology really begins to feel real, in my opinion, which is why readings work best as a conversation between the astrologer and the person that is being read for. So follow us here on YouTube. If you find us on Facebook and Instagram, that's where you'll find updates, posts, announcements. Sometimes there's changes to the meditation schedule. We've had a little bit of that lately. All of that is on social media, so you will find that there. There's also a weekly intention that is released on Fridays that is astrologically guided, and that will play into, you can have that with the weekly video as you go through it, and then that will play into the live meditation that we have on Sundays. So Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the things. Let's walk this astrological journey together. And then, of course, Meditative Astrology is meditativeastrology.com is the hub for all of the things. All right, let's go ahead and get right into this week here, shall we? We start out right away on Sunday with Mars conjoining Neptune. We talked in last week's video about Mars moving into the sign of Aries, entering the other planets that are already there. As soon as Mars entered Aries, the tail end of last week, it started moving towards the conjunction with first Neptune and then Saturn. So Sunday here is when Mars and Neptune come together directly. When you have these two planets coming together in any sort of form, especially in the sign of Aries, where Mars is within its domicile ruler, there's a call to action. Okay? There's a feeling or a drive so deep within you that can show and express itself. I think about trusting the process of initiation, especially in the sign of Aries. Mars is a planet that likes to move, it likes to initiate, it likes to start, and it likes to, its motivation, its ambition, its drive, right? In the sign of Aries, in the cardinal sign that it rules, that starts the zodiac for us, we are initiated into processes. We are dropped into form. It's a fire sign, it's a creative sign that brings things from the intangible world, maybe from the energetic space, into some sort of physical form, in its raw, authentic form. So trusting that process of initiation, when the planet Mars comes into contact with Neptune in the sign of Aries. Neptune is that planet that can either connect us deeply or disconnect us. When it connects us deeply, it's something that we feel coming from within, or a space that feels divine of some kind, feels source-driven. It feels like it comes from something bigger than ourselves, or something that comes from deep within ourselves, and we feel it so deeply, a drive or a motivation that you feel so deeply that you are called to act upon it, Mars. So a call to action in some sort of form. The movement happens with Mars in the sign of Aries, right? If Mars wants to move forward in whatever it is that it's taking action in the sign of Aries. You can look to the whole sign house of Aries in your birth chart to look for a little bit more details there. But when it comes into contact with Neptune within that place of movement, you can have movement without clarity. And this can play out a couple different ways for us. It can play out positively or a little bit more difficultly. I'm thinking about following a path, even if you don't know exactly where it'll lead. Again, this is trusting the process of initiation or trusting the path that you are on in some sort of way. It's not knowing where exactly that path will lead you, but just knowing that you need to go that direction, and that is the direction that is calling to you, right? So there is something within me that is calling for me to go to this direction, or there is something bigger than myself, something that feels divine or creator level, source level, God, head, whatever works for you in your terminology. So following the drive, following the ambition, right? Moving with a purpose-driven action and a motivation that feels like it's coming from deep within or something bigger than us. The shadow side of that is the illusion or the disillusionment. So things not being quite as they appear. Moving parts that miss the mark or don't go quite as planned. Not being able to clearly see the path in front of us and then tripping over it in some sort of way. Or things not going the way that we expected them to. Neptune can make things fuzzy and still feel that deep connection, and it can even disconnect us from reality. So if we are moving for the sake of movement without having the clarity or the precise direction of exactly where we are going, if we're just moving for the sake of movement, then there can be unexpected things that can come from that. And if we are disconnected from reality in some sort of way with Neptune, then the Mars and Aries movements can feel like they can spiral really, really quick. They can be very combustible in this sign coming together here. So different ways that this can go, right? Like any sort of transit. I'm also thinking about the possibility of separation from, again, that like inner feeling of where something comes from, that deep space within you, or feeling some sort of separation from the divine connection of somehow, or it might be wanting to individuate yourself from some other greater purpose or source, or wanting to go out your own way in your own direction in some sort of way. The separation can be helpful and can be positive, right? It can have us standing on our own 2 feet and empower us to go down our own path, which is a very Aries-like theme. But the separation, again, if we're not quite connected with reality, or if we're not quite seeing the picture completely and things are a little foggy or a little hazy, there can be smoke screens in front of us when we have Neptune. So the illusion of separation can be there too. We feel disconnected from something, or we are isolating ourselves from something in some sort of way. So sometimes that separation can be positive, but also it can be misleading in some sort of way. So is there really a separation? Is there really a severing moment like Mars likes to give us, or is that part of the illusion? Is the separation that is coming about reactionary, or is it warranted? Again, the movements can be really fast in the sign of Aries, and Mars moves really, really quickly as well. And if we're not quite, grounded maybe, then it's possible that we can be reactionary with Mars in the sign of Aries, and with Neptune coming in, bringing its piece. So really the deep themes of Mars and Neptune coming together here are deep connection versus disconnection. And then how is that playing out within our lives at the moment? As we have planets come through Neptune and Saturn, they really are echoing back to that conjunction that we had with Neptune and Saturn. They're starting to separate. They are about 4 degrees away from each other. That conjunction is still in play, but it's not quite as strong as it was, let's say, through the second half of February, and well, really all of February and all of March, we can say. But it's still there. So it's like these planets that are going across Mars. Mercury is going to move across it. They're kind of reactivating it, and they're bringing that sensitive point back into play. So with all of these themes, with Mars coming in, there can be movements and drives and ambitions and motivations related to how the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has shown up for you. As Mercury moves across, there can be mental processes that are happening in relation to how the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has played out for you. So that is something else to keep in mind. So at the same time that we have Mars and Neptune coming together, we have a nice little sextile happening between Venus and Jupiter. We just had a square between the two of them not too long ago when Venus was in the sign of Aries. This aspect here brings in a little bit of receptivity and understanding because these are feminine signs coming through. So you have a little bit of an emphasis of the yin energy at the same time that you have all of this Aries energy. When you have Venus and Jupiter coming together, there is the ability to cohesively bring two different things together. And, you know, that's partially because of that feminine uniting yin energy. But also, both of these planets are in great positions right now. Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, and Venus in the sign of Taurus is in its home sign, in its domicile. So both of them are in places where they are very strong, and they are very confident, and they have independence about them. They are able to have their own agency in some sort of way. So they're able to do as they please, you know, and they're the two benefic planets coming through here too in a positive aspect. So this can be very helpful, even though it's a subtle aspect, because it's the sextile. Trines are usually a little bit louder, and then the conjunctions as well. Perhaps the cohesion and the coming together can bring the emotional and the physical realms together. We have Taurus and earth sign. We have Cancer of water sign. So I could see the emotions and the physical coming together, or real connections coming to those sensitive spaces and bringing it into some sort of tangible form. Or with the sign of Taurus, really embodying our emotions and really being able to feel into them, especially if there's been something that has felt like it's been cut off or severed or some sort of way, which could echo back to the sign of Aries that we have going on here, right? When these two planets come together, especially with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, where I think so much of that grandmotherly wisdom type energy and that archetype of the wise elder that has something to show us, something to teach us, but they do it in a bit of a hopefully gentle way sometimes, right? They might send us down a path where we kind of have to learn the thing ourselves. But usually there's kind of a gentle nudge, even if there's, you know, quite a bit of whatever that is going to be in front of us here. So is there a lesson or an insight that is available, or some sort of new pathway that can show up here for us? Again, it might be kind of subtle or kind of gentle, like, you know, there's all this that's going on in Aries, and there's a whole lot of, you know, possibly turmoil and feathers being ruffled. But here's a little pathway. Here's a little nugget of help in some sort of way. It's helpful if Aries and all the action going on there really is just causing a ruckus in your life, then this sextile might just feel like a little reprieve, or it might feel like nothing at all. Whatever the loudest thing that is going on for us is often the one that we're going to notice the quickest and the most often there. But these planets in these positions can bring great value to our interactions between other people and ourselves on both levels. Venus is in the superior position, so she's talking to Jupiter. It's as if she's asking a question of Jupiter, or asking something of Jupiter within the sextile, or asking for help. Now, Venus in the sign of Taurus, she's looking for ease, she's looking for comfort, she's looking for enjoyment, she's looking for connection, she's looking for stability. So maybe Venus is asking Jupiter, you're like, you know, hey, grandmother, how can you point me towards a path of stability? How can you point me to a path of ease or cohesion or comfort or enjoyment, even in the midst of all of this warrior energy that I feel bubbling within me? How can I balance the two of them? Is something that could come up for some of us. Is there a connection that I'm missing in some sort of way? And then Jupiter answers in Cancer speak, offering the nurturing and the care of the emotional type. The sensitive spaces are soothed here, and the emotional healing is something that can be facilitated between these two planets coming together, and especially within the signs that they are in. Emotional balance, when we can find a space to be comfortable and be nurtured in those sensitive spaces, emotional balance can bring physical stability, right? Like, if we think about it, that is just something that is possible. When our emotions are level and we feel like we are, you know, level-headed or whatnot, then it's just easier for life to be a little more physically flowing and a little more physically stable. If our emotions are a little bit rocky, then it seems like other things are affected by that, or it ripples out in some sort of way here. The Cancer themes could come up here too, as either an answer or something relating to Venus here. So Venus relating to women and desires and pleasure, and really just where we find enjoyment and comfort in the sign of Taurus, especially within physical ways. That may come up in relation to our family or our ancestry, our origins, the origins from which we've come from, as well as our own personal origins. We all have a familial story, but we all have a personal story and origin too, that extends, you know, from the time that we were born to the moment we are now. And if it's within your realm, then, you know, even to previous lives that happened before, if reincarnation is something that you subscribe to. The memory body, as well as life-giving cycles in all forms, can be brought into focus, and really just those nurturing spaces. The memory body, our conditionings, the ones that we're aware of and the ones that we're not aware of, subconscious things can come up here. There's really a lot of different ways that Cancer can show up for us. So again, if Aries is causing a whole lot going on, maybe you don't necessarily notice this sextile here. Maybe you don't notice it unless you slow down and pay attention to the astrology that's going on, and then you have it at your awareness and you see it a little bit more often. But it's almost as though Venus and Jupiter are saying to us, whatever Aries is doing at the moment needs to bring balance, needs to bring harmony, needs to bring a space where we can find some sort of cohesion. We can find a space where we can embody the balance of the emotional balance of Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, and that emotional wisdom of the grandmother archetype in some sort of way. Even if just a little just a sliver of it that we can hold within our space in some sort of way. Whatever we are doing or whatever we are jumping into, again, Aries jumps right into things full force, needs to have a deeper material and energetic substance with this sextile that is going on here through this week. Or, you know, these two planets may be helping facilitate these things coming into play here as well. So it might be a little bit of an offset as Mars and Neptune come together. Maybe there's a little more insight, a little bit more knowledge, and a little bit more for us to learn than what really just meets the eye with the conjunction that we have going on. Of course, a conjunction is generally going to be louder than a sextile, but it does kind of help buffer the edges a little bit there. So Sunday, we're starting off right away with a bang. And then we have a couple days where there's a little bit of a lull. If we go ahead and move forward into Monday the 13th, we're going to follow the Aquarius moon into the sign of Pisces with a couple aspects going on. If we go ahead and move forward into Tuesday, April 14th, we're going to follow that Pisces moon, and we don't have any major lunar aspects that are going on here this day. Again, when I look at aspects for lunar aspects, I look at the big ones. I look at the loudest ones. So we look at the oppositions, the conjunctions, and the squares for lunar aspects. So there may be smaller aspects or minor aspects that are going on that I don't necessarily put out here. There's no planetary aspects that are going on Tuesday either. Then if we go ahead and move forward into Wednesday, April 15th, this is where Mercury is going to move into the sign of Aries. And when Mercury moves into the sign of Aries, we are going to have a major pileup in the sign of Aries. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up here so that way you can see. I'm going to go ahead and roll it forward. I have it set to Sunday. We're going to go ahead and roll this forward here into Wednesday. And if you look in the 10th house in this chart, you'll see the sign of Aries. You will see that we have Mercury. By this time of the day, we will have the moon, we have Neptune, we have Mars, Saturn, Sun, and Chiron are all in the sign of Aries here. The moon moves into the sign of Aries just ahead of Mercury, and then they're going to conjoin together right there at 0 degrees of Aries. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we have the new moon coming through here. The second half of this week is so Aries focused. The month of April is a huge focus on the sign of Aries within our birth charts, but this second half of this week here, say from like the 15th to maybe the 17th to the 18th, there is a huge focus in the sign of Aries. So watch yourself for burnout. Watch yourself for burning the candle at both ends. If there's something that you are motivated to really do, there might be some drive to do so within, or to put forth a lot of effort. Now, you might be up against some things because of all the planets and the things that we have going on here that we're going to talk about. But there really may feel a drive or a push or a motivation of some kind here for the second half of this week. Once Mars enters or Mercury enters the sign of Aries, we are looking at very direct and bold communications coming through here. Bold thoughts, words, actions, and movements here. Movements and actions because Mars is in the sign of Aries too. And remember that Mars rules the sign of Aries. So it's strengthening that house of Aries for us in our chart. I'm thinking about resources coming through here with Mercury moving into the sign of Aries to either aid the movements in the sign of Aries. Again, looking to that whole sign house for the topics within your own birth chart. The house is amplified so much for all of us that I think would be a good practice for all of us to meditate on the sign of Aries within our lives, within our charts. And you can do that on your own, or we can do that together too through a reading. Within resources, patterns, routines, those resources and helpful tools and insights that can move us forward may start to present themselves. They might be things that come quickly, suddenly, because it's a sign of Aries, and Mercury moves swift too, right? So, little tools or resources or insights. I say insights mostly because Mercury represents our mind, thoughts, communications, and it's going to be moving right into that conjunction with Neptune too, and that can bring messages in many different ways. We might miss them if we're either moving too fast because of what's going on in Aries, or because the insight or the message or the little resource is moving quickly here too. I'm thinking about individual or strengthening encouragement in some sort of way. Again, this is a very individual pioneering sign, and a strengthening encouragement when Mercury is in Aries, it's strong, it's bold, right? So, it's able to lift itself up. So the encouragement from within, individual encouragement, right? Like self-talk, I'm thinking, is possible. Mars and Mercury in Aries, especially with all that's going on there, can have, some shadow sides of argumentative, or, saying too much, right? Or speaking too fast, or not thinking about words before you say them, thinking about the repercussions of the words. Aries is very good at act now, think later, and when we are speaking with ourselves or others, or writing in some sort of way, or there's some sort of communication, that can be really, really difficult to take back. So that's just something to keep in mind. Overall, that Aries confident mindset really begins to set in, and then the moon, when the moon conjoins it, it brings the emotional aspect. So again, just watch the way you communicate to yourself and others, specifically on this day when Mercury and the moon are coming together here. So yeah, we're gonna just continue the pile up in the sign of Aries here midweek here. And then so Wednesday we have Mercury moving into the sign of Aries, and then if I go back to our main thing here, we can move forward into Thursday. This is where Mercury is going to conjoin Neptune. So again, it's going to move into the sign of Aries. That conjunction is really starting to apply. So you can really think of, as soon as Mercury enters the sign of Aries, that being something that is on the table. So, connecting to subtle energies, this alludes to the messages and insights that I talked about when we talked about the ingress. So messages, signs, and symbols may speak louder. Loud in the sign of Aries, and maybe suddenly because it's a sign of Aries. So Aries, Mars is loud, it's fast, it's sudden. Mental inspiration that comes from within or comes from the creator. Again, Neptune connects us deeply to things. So feeling that voice coming from within you, right? Hearing your own conscience in some sort of way. Hearing the voice of the universe, whatever that means to you. Hearing the voice of God, hearing messages, angels, things like that. Messages coming through in mundane ways, in physical form, that come from the other side in some sort of way are very possible here. Creation energy for sure. Neptune is imaginative and can dream and can dissolve borders and make it feel like anything is possible. And in the sign of Aries, we might just really be rolling forward with it. Early Aries is very inspiring. It's a very inceptional, initiating, starting space. So things come into raw form here, right? They go from the formless to the form. Again, it's the beginning of the zodiac here. It's the cardinal sign of spring where things are initiated. The light comes back into dominance. Things can come into form. Things can come into the light in the sign of Aries. With Neptune, the imaginative creative flow might really be flowing here. So this is something that could be really helpful for some of us. Again, thinking about that voice that's coming from within and then the strength of Aries and then Mercury being the mind and things like that. Standing up for what you believe in. Neptune's deep connection and Aries' raw potential can lead us to a defense in many different ways. So if Neptune has you very committed to your beliefs of whatever they are, whether they are political or spiritual or, ethical, moral, whatever the belief is, you might really feel strongly convicted about that. And you might really feel that in the mental field when Mercury and Neptune are coming together here. Mars and Neptune, you might decide to act on it, right? So maybe if you act on something as Mars comes through this conjunction with Neptune and then Mercury comes through, maybe there's some aftermath, maybe there's some thought process that has to come through regarding the situation. That's also a possibility here. And then if we think about the misjudging or the fogginess of Neptune, mental indecision or misjudgment is a possibility. Neptune brings that fog and that haze, and it can be hard to see clearly. So that can lead us to misjudging or trusting the flow in the process when maybe that's not exactly the path we should be going down. And the shoulds, that's all relative. You guys all know that's the way I roll with that type of stuff. But there is a right and a wrong space for us at the moment, right? So watching for misjudging, with these planets coming across Neptune and Aries, quick sudden accidents, trips and falls, things like that. So just be aware of hazards. Just be aware of, try to keep our feet on the ground as we are dreaming big in the sign of Aries and as things are moving very, very quickly. As these planets come across Neptune, they're going to be moving towards a conjunction with Saturn. Again, there's a little bit of distance, so you have a couple days in between these, but really they're still pretty close together. So it might feel like the inspiration and the move to go forward and then the break, right? Like go forward, stop. And I've talked about this several different times about, the Saturn-Neptune thing that we have in Aries. So Aries really wants to go forward. It wants to start, it wants to initiate, but there's a break there. Saturn's there. So it may feel like we are pushing up against something in any of these aspects that we're talking about because Saturn is not that far away and all of these planets are going to be applying to Saturn. It's not like they're separating from Saturn. They're with Neptune and then they're moving towards Saturn rather than like away from Saturn. So it's building in strength rather than losing strength here. So that takes us through into Thursday. We move forward into Friday. We get the new moon in the sign of Aries. New moon happens about 7:50 a.m. Eastern time. Translate to that to your own time zone, and it is just shy of 28 degrees at 27 degrees and 28 minutes. This new moon is a powerful new beginning that is not afraid to move on from whatever the perceived limitation is. Let's go ahead and put the chart up for the new moon here. Again, I'm going to just roll this chart forward a couple days to get us a little bit closer, and then we're going to just back up some hours here. So this is literally just minutes afterwards. So we're just going to leave this chart here. Okay, so if you look in the 12th house in this chart, you will see the sun and the moon conjoining at 27 degrees. Notice that Saturn is at 7, Mars is at what, 5, and Mercury is at 3, and Neptune is at 2. So that Mercury-Neptune conjunction is still there. Mercury, Mars, and Saturn are all applying to a conjunction, and they are actually going to come together in a triple conjunction at 7 degrees. So this aspect here, this triple conjunction that we're going to be talking about, is going to be building into strength and coming into form here. It's a part of this lunation because it's in the applying aspect, and it's growing in strength at the time of this new moon here. So, powerful new beginnings, inception moments. New moons are always new beginnings, right? It's in the sign of Aries, the sign of starting, the sign of initiating. Not afraid to move on from whatever the perceived limitation is. That is Saturn, Mars, and Mercury coming together. So Aries is Mars' sign, separation as well as starting points coming through here. It's a late degree new moon. Both the sun and the moon are going to be moving on to new signs soon. The moon's going to be doing that, on the day of the new moon. The sun is going to be moving into the sign of Taurus just a couple days later. So they're moving into a new space and a new energy. They're leaving one behind as they move into another. Think about standing in one room of a house and then walking through the door into another house or into another room of the house. You're still in the same house, you're still in the same zodiacal wheel, but you are now in a house or in a room that there's different activities that happen here, right? You can't do the same things. You can't cook like you would in the kitchen in the bathroom, right? Like it just doesn't work. You don't have the things that you need there to be able to do that. So there's a starting, there's an initiating because it's a new moon, but you have both the initiation and the separation in the sign of Aries, and then at that late degree new moon, you have that starting point, but there's also something that is ending, something that is culminating. When Saturn and Mars come together, they are not afraid to separate and sever things and to move away from the perceived boundaries that are there. Saturn in Aries speaks to the perceived boundaries, limitations, and the frameworks that we are up against, right? We are called to show our level of preservation, right? In the sign of, can you be persistent in the sign of Aries when Saturn is there? Can you start and initiate, but can you keep pushing when things get hard, right? Can you keep the effort level? We are tested in this type of way. Our energy levels might fluctuate when Saturn is in the sign of Aries. Saturn is debilitated in the sign of Aries. Mars is lifted up in the sign of Aries. So energy levels may fluctuate as we are really asked, what are you willing to put in the true effort to get this going, right? To start, to initiate. Are you willing to push against what feels like an immovable rock? Are you willing to put forth all of your force into this action potential and bring it into life and bring it into form? It can really feel like we are pushing to move mountains, but the effort can be worth it in ways that forms and structures that come about that can stand the test of time or are larger and stronger than they were before. Can you push through? Can you stand your ground while hopefully not stepping on others, right? That's the balance that we can find at the opposite end of the zodiac in the sign of Libra, which is where our full moon just was. So we had a little bit of a lesson in that recently for us. These planets, they have tangled with Neptune just before moving with Saturn. So are they inspired or are they overwhelmed? Is there clarity or is there disillusion? Is there some sort of illusion that we need to look for? Are we in a moment of enchantment and inspiration or disappointment? Are the smoke screens clearing and are we realizing, the hard realities of what Neptune's dreaminess was showing us is just not possible? Right? So then you have the hard no of Saturn coming through. But if you can push through, if you can put in the effort, in the work here, in the new moon, then what can grow and come from it can be very strong and very sturdy in different type of ways. These are some of the things that Mars and Mercury coming across Saturn through this lunation are going to be speaking to within the tone of this lunation here. And if Saturn and Mars are destroying or tearing down forms, because that is something that they often like to do when they come together, and maybe doing it to create something new or make space for something new in the sign of Aries, potentially. I'm wondering if Mercury may give us an avenue to be able to rebuild, but rebuild with the strength and the determination of Saturn Mars. So again, this is where you get that, like, you know, standing the test of time, or, you know, a new structure coming into form, but it's stronger than the old one, right? Or like, you know, there's the limitations that were there are not there. So then we can just go forward without having to be up against something that's kind of pushing us down in some sort of way. So the completions as well as the beginnings are really, really amplified here. Oh, you know, and if we look at the sign of Taurus, which is the first house in this chart, you'll notice that Venus is moving towards a conjunction with Uranus. It's building. It's not quite within that 3-degree engagement range, so I wouldn't say that the conjunction is a part of this new moon, but we're moving towards it. And these two planets are going to conjoin, and then the very next day, Venus is going to move into the sign of Gemini, and then just a couple days later, Uranus is going to move into the sign of Gemini for good. So it's going to close that 7-year chapter of Uranus in the sign of Taurus for us. And I feel like that amplifies the completions as well as the beginnings in another way. So I think it's important to make note of that impending conjunction here, because it echoes something of the new moon here, of the completions and the beginnings coming together at the same time. Now, during this new moon here, we also have an interaction between Mars and Pluto. We have a nice little sextile between Mars in Aries and Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. Subtle empowerment. This is how I'm hoping that it shows up for all of us. Again, it's a sextile. These are not necessarily quiet or, you know, subtle planets, so it might show up a little bit louder. But when these two are coming together in a favorable aspect, Mars is power, it's strength. Pluto can be a deep-seated strength that comes up from either within us or from the underground, things coming up to be unearthed. Being able to move forward with maybe some sort of subterranean material coming up for us in some sort of way. Problem solving, if there's issues and, you know, if those limitations of Saturn have us feeling stuck, I'm wondering about being able to problem solve, because Mars and Pluto can investigate, they can look into things, and Mercury has that aspect too of being able to ask questions and to problem solve and to put different pieces together. So I'm wondering if some of the difficulties, if there might be some aspects of problem solving here that is possible for some of us here as well. With Pluto being in the sign of Aquarius, I'm wondering about an innovative connection of some kind coming through in Aquarius, moving forward, advancing the theme of idealism along with ideologies, like it should be this way, I should be moving this way. Maybe there's a little bit of a collective concern in the direction that we are moving independently. Things like that could come through here. So this adds some extra oomph to this new moon that we have that is already a little bit oomphy in its own way here. So there we are. There's the new moon energy that is coming through on Friday. And then if we go ahead and move forward to Saturday, this is where you have the exact conjunction of Mars and Saturn coming together here. Let me go ahead and just pull this up too, so that way I'm just going to go back to the chart here, and we're just going to pull this forward a day here. All right. So if we watch Mars coming together, they come at 6, they come together at 7, and then if we just roll this forward a little bit further here, you see that we have a little while here from Saturday into Sunday where all 3 of these planets are coming together. Now we're going to talk more about this on next week's video too, since it's actually coming through technically the triple conjunction on Sunday, but it's coming through here through the second half of the week. It's built into the lunation that we have. Mars and Saturn coming together, a lot of the things that we've already talked about, pushing against those boundaries, those perceived limitations. Challenging authority is another thing that can come up with Mars and Saturn coming together, especially in the sign of Aries, which is a very authentic and individualistic sign that is willing to go its own way. And then again, I just want to emphasize that process of inspiration and then boundaries or reality setting in. Maybe Neptune has us dreaming a little bit too big, or it gives us just enough imagination to get some oomph behind us, to give us some motivation for Saturn and Mars to do what's necessary, to orchestrate the structures the way that they need to bring that creation reality that we talked about with Neptune into form, into creation, into a space of inception in the sign of Aries. So the inspiration and the creativity that can come through here can have us feeling overzealous and overactive imagination for sure, and moving in that way. But it might also just be enough inspiration to allow us to take steps boldly that maybe we wouldn't have taken before. So there's a ton of energy here this week. There's a ton of stopping, starting, initiating, finishing all at the same time. And those things are contradictory. So it might feel like there's lots of moving pieces. It might feel like this week is a little bit frustrating in some sort of ways. It may feel like we are putting forth an immense amount of effort, and is this worth it? That might be one of the questions we find ourselves. Is this worth it, right? This road that I'm about to embark on, this path that I'm going on, is it worth it in the end? Am I willing to put forth the effort to see what direction we go? And how long am I willing to put that effort forth before it leads to burnout or some sort of frustration or aggression of some sort of way coming through? All of the things this week, all of the things. That is what I have for you as far as the astrology. It's a ton. If you enjoyed this and you haven't already subscribed to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button so that way you get notifications for our next week's video, and come join us at our live meditation. All this Aries energy, all these moving parts and this go, go, go energy is a great time for all of us to intentionally slow ourselves down and bring us to a space of quiet, a place of silence. Saturn is in Mars, Mars is a sign of Aries, right? Saturn, slow down the pace once in a while when you're moving quickly, right? A lot of us say that we are too busy to find time for meditation, or if we're stretching or exercising or yoga or whatever the thing is. When we can't find the time for these things, that's really when we need it the most. I know you know what I'm talking about. I've experienced it myself. I'm sure you all have experienced it too. So subscribe to the channel. Let's walk this astrological journey together. Join us at our live meditation, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We will have a meditation the Sunday correlating with this video coming out, which will be Sunday, April 12th. I will announce here that Sunday, April 19th, I will be out of town, so there will not be a meditation that week. Again, if you find us on Facebook and Instagram, all of those scheduling announcements and changes are all posted there. So that's the best way to keep in contact with that. If you have questions about any of these aspects or transits that we are talking about, go on my website, book a reading, and we can talk about it. I have full readings, I have single transit readings if you just want to look at one specific thing, but within your own birth chart in the context, and we can unpack that together. So thank you for walking through this week astrologically with me. I hope it is an absolutely wonderful, empowering, and inspiring week for everybody, with very minimal difficulties and pushback. So, all right, take care. I will see you next week, and have a good one.